Oh, we are live. Hello, good afternoon, good noon. It's 12 o'clock on the dot, so I never know what to say, but good morning, good afternoon. Not good morning anymore, really. It's good afternoon, isn't it? Welcome. Thank you for joining us. If you're here already, fantastic. If you're not, then where are you? You should be here waiting for us. But joking. I always make the same joke, Hannah. I apologise. But yeah, no, I'm excited to have this conversation. But whilst we're allowing people to join, if you are here listening already, please come say hello. Please get involved and ask Hannah questions or comments along the way. If you are listening, say hello now. Tell us where you're listening from or wherever it might be. Just let us know if you're listening already. We've got a cool episode today with the superstar Hannah, and I can't wait to get going. We got 30 seconds before we get started. Though, give us 90 seconds, and then we can start. Anything to add to this ramble, Hannah?
No, I don't think so. Not right now. But yeah, no, excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And yeah, look forward to seeing where people are joining from and seeing some questions, hopefully. And for those who are watching the recorded version as well, welcome. So yeah,
apologies.
Excited to dive into it.
Yeah, if you're watching the recorded episode, apologies for rambling for the first 90 seconds.
The intro bit's always the hardest, isn't it? You're just like, I don't know what to say.
No. And that's the joys of live podcasting or live streaming, I guess. Let's get going. Hannah, thank you for joining me. I'm excited to get into this. And we're going to look at it's called, we titled this Play the Hand You've Been Dealt, right? Because we're going to look at actually just understanding our strengths, understanding who we are and how we lean into those things to make sure that we are getting the most out of that in our performance, both inside and outside of work. So really excited, right? Strengths is something which is part of my 6 pillars to performance. And so I'm really excited to see and hear about how you do that, how you implement it. Because hopefully I can learn something, and if I can learn something, I feel sure somebody else will learn something. So look, I'm gonna shut up. I'm gonna throw the mic over to you, Hannah. Could you introduce yourself? Could you tell the people who you are, what you do?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Hannah. I am a qualified strengths and career coach. I focus on women mainly and just supporting them through what I call the foggy middle, which is where you know something is off. You kind of have this feeling like something isn't right, but you don't really know what's happening or how to articulate it. So my approach to coaching is very much based with, around strengths, as you've mentioned, and basically helping to give people the language that they need to be able to articulate what it is they're truly good at, things that actually energize them as well, because I think we've been told a lot of what we think we're good at over our lives, but that's not necessarily the case. So I help people discover that, and then I help them build this narrative around their strengths, essentially, which means that they can sort of confidently go out into the world, and specifically the working world, and tell people who they are, what they want to be known for, and where they want that to take them. But I'm also a people development leader, and I have been for 10 plus years. So I've been sort of in the corporate environment most of my career. Spent a bit of time in retail, and I currently work at a company called Dentsu, which is a global media and advertising business, which has, I think, about 60,000 plus people globally. So it's a pretty big company, very complicated organization. But I still work in that sort of learning and enablement space. But it's quite an interesting role because I sit within a business function rather than reporting into HR or L&D, which gives me some sort of unique perspective and a closeness to the business I don't think I would get otherwise. But yeah, it's a really cool role. So I kind of dually do that and the coaching. So yeah, thank you for having me.
No problem. What led you down the coaching route?
So very much, and I think this is true of a lot of coaches, but I think very much to do with my own experiences. So when I was more junior in my career, I spent a long time essentially trying to be someone I wasn't. And it took me a while to feel, feel out kind of what was happening there and realize. But I was really trying to play a game and play a system that didn't work for me at all. And it meant things like being passed up for promotions, getting frustrated, getting sort of de-energized by stuff that I was doing. I felt like I was doing a good job by all means, but I think I kind of learned a lot about visibility is one thing, but also just like we kind of, the topic of this podcast, playing the hand you've been dealt. So after a bit of what felt like a slog in a role that I did enjoy, but I just ultimately it wasn't for me. It wasn't what I was made for. I did a lot of work on my strengths. I got introduced to the tool that we'll be talking a bit about later, I'm sure. And it gave me that way to articulate what it was I was good at. And previously, where I didn't see myself as a leader, I thought I would have to become somebody I wasn't, assertive, direct, outgoing, all these different things that were sort of that more traditional view of leadership. I wasn't, and I realized that. But then seeing what strengths were reflected back at me when I did this series of assessments and in this work, like deep inner work, was this version of a leader that I hadn't really appreciated before, what I call sort of quiet influence. And the more time I sat with it and the more time I sort of noticed it show up in action and put it into practice, the more I realized that I was becoming the best version of myself. And through that, I was able to curate a career that I'm really, really proud of now. I've gone in loads of different directions. I'm one of those kind of people that is more generalist, I guess. Like I went out and collected lots of different experiences that were more aligned to who I was fundamentally. And like I said, kind of it's gotten me to where I am today, which is really proud of my career path. And I know that, basically I've always been interested in people and talent. I did psychology at uni. It sort of predates that even as well. I've always had this deep curiosity about people. And at a certain point in my professional career, I thought, well, what else can I do with this? I'm craving that need to support people in a more meaningful way. And I thought about coaching, and I did this qualification. And I think through trying to figure out what your niche is, we call it, so what is you want to focus on with your coaching, I was like, well, hang on. I think when I reflect back on my own journey, I took a very methodical approach to learning about my strengths and learning to articulate them, putting it into practice. Why couldn't I help other women do the same thing, essentially? So that's where it all kind of started, I guess, and what it was born out of was my own experience, and then sort of building a framework around that I could use to support other women. Because I think that's now my biggest frustration, right, is hearing other women say they don't feel like they're good enough or they can't progress because of X, Y, Z. It just, just go, no, come on, we can do this.
Yeah, I get that. I remember you mentioned in our initial chat about being told you being too nice. Can you just elaborate on that for us?
Yeah. So part of that early journey, I guess, was, and that feeling like I wasn't ever going to progress and become the leader that I thought I needed to be, was I got a lot of feedback about the fact that I was a really nice person, which sounds fine in practice, but I realized more and more it was being used against me. And it was a case of, you need to be more direct. You need to be more assertive with what you want. You need to go out there and make relationships, but in a way that didn't really feel good to me. I'm still not the kind of person to just walk up to people and be like, hi, I'm Hannah, let me introduce myself. I'm just not that kind of person. So I was being fed all of this stuff. It's like, you're a really nice person, but, you're a really nice person, but, and I really learned to resent that word in quite one. And even now, if someone says you're really nice, I'm like, ugh, like you must have something else to say about me. There must be more to it than that. But I think through learning about my own strengths and being able to articulate them in a different way, I learned that like being nice for me actually meant having empathy. It meant having relational intelligence. It meant being a connector of people and ideas. And all of that led me to this realization that actually I have this quiet influence that is actually a very unique and strategic leadership skill. I'm not going to be the person at the front, rallying everybody together and being really loud and saying, right, let's go. I'm the person at the back who is quietly listening and observing, getting to know individuals one-on-one. And then at the point where I'm ready to kind of take charge or take leadership, in my mind, I've got a much better picture of what's going on. And I have this sort of intuition now that I've learned to trust in a really meaningful way that does make me a great leader. And I think it has been a journey for sure, but I think that's where I saw this kind of being nice is actually turning into, strategic power and influence, really. Yeah.
At what point, or what helped you kind of learn that? Was there anybody, or was it doing the strengths profiling or some coaching around that helped you recognize that, or was it just something you began to recognize by yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky that a colleague at the time introduced me to the profile, and we actually ended up doing it as a team activity. So in the team that I was in at the time, we all got told to go away and do our profile. So it's formerly the strengths profile. They've actually just done an update. It's now skills discovery, same premise, but slightly different name, which is by Capfinity. But we all got told to go away and do this questionnaire, which basically then produces you with this report, which gives you a breakdown of your different strengths and skills, if you like. So we all went away and did that. And then we sort of presented back a view together as a team. And I think, I mean, it's one of those, like, and I see this when I work with clients, right? It's like they see this report and they sort of go, that's interesting. Like some things really resonate. Some things feel a bit surprising. For me, it was what we call the unrealized strengths. So you've got realized strengths on one of the quadrants, which is things that you do really well and all the time and give you energy and you're probably doing without really thinking about it too much. Unrealized strengths, on the other hand, are things that you do well and give you energy, but actually are things that you're potentially underutilizing. And that's where I saw all of these really cool leadership traits that I hadn't really appreciated in myself before. Like it felt like me, but not a version of myself that I'd almost let myself explore yet. So that's where I got really excited. But I think having that opportunity to discuss it as a team and figure out, you know, we weren't focusing on individual at that point, but we were talking about, okay, well, what is this collection of strengths we have as a team and how do we want to kind of move that forward, which is a big part of coaching, is that accountability and sort of creating an action plan out of it. But I would say I'm one of those kind of people, like I love an assessment, you know, personality test, all of that kind of stuff, but I'm the person that actually does something with it. I think I noticed that a lot of people like doing this kind of thing and they get this report and they go, that's great. And then they just sort of put it to one side and don't ever look at it again. So I was very intentional in mapping it to my development plan at the time and saying, well, these are the skills that I have seen that I'm really excited about. What can I do with that? Because some of them feel a bit abstract, right? So judgment was one of mine, being able to trust your own instincts. And I was like, okay, well, what do I do with that? And, you know, having conversations with my line manager at the time and realizing that, you know, sometimes it was just about in every meeting I go into, rather than sitting on an idea, assuming that somebody else is going to say it, or, you know, it's not worth the time or people aren't going to value it, just have a go at just say it and see what happens, see what the reaction is. And it was small things like that of just integrating it into my day-to-day, finding opportunities to just test it a little bit, push the boundary. And, you know, where I was worried about overstepping the mark, it turns out I was getting nowhere near the line. I was worried I was going to get an adverse reaction, never really did. So I think all of that really helped. It is an ongoing practice. It's not something you can just sit there and go, okay, cool, these are my strengths, I'm good to go now. You really have to put the effort in and practice it. It's a muscle that needs practicing, because these are innate strengths of yours, but, you know, especially in the unrealized kind of quadrant, they are things that you do need to really pay attention to. And then over time, some of those unrealized strengths have become realized strengths because I've been using them so much that I now do it without thinking about it.
You said you've done a lot of profiling or personality things, right? Like I'm a colours coach, and there are tons of other ones, and you've probably done a few, right, within your role. Why do you resonate with the Capfinity Strengths one?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, the one that you get a lot in corporate environments, especially, is the Myers-Briggs personality types. I really struggled with that. We did that a lot at my previous company, and I was almost like told things about myself that I didn't realize people kind of, I don't know, were seeing or observing. Like it literally got to the point where I still don't really know where I sit on the introversion extroversion scale, to be honest. I'm sort of in the middle of everything, which is really frustrating, actually. And it made me feel like I didn't have an identity, which was really hard. But I literally had people coming to me like, no, you're an introvert. No, you're an extrovert. No, you're this. No, you're that. And I was like, well, this is too much. And I think I kind of tried to approach it from different contexts. And I almost ended up, and this is partly, I guess, to do with where I was at sort of, you know, at the time in my career. But I felt like I had two versions of myself, the version of myself at work and the version of myself at home with friends and with people that I was really comfortable with. the strengths profile is one that resonates throughout. There is no two different versions of me. It is just me.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's different situations where you lean into one more than the other, depending on what you're doing and who you're with. But it's fundamentally me. All the other ones that I've tried, and I haven't tried all of them, I must say, but especially Myers-Briggs, I was like, I'm more confused than when I started.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, I think it is right, and it's interesting, isn't it? The different styles. I'm the same as you, Ryan. Like anything that I can learn, I find interesting. Oh, I learn about myself, I find interesting, but actually the application of them, I've not done Myers-Briggs just yet. But I find it all quite fascinating, and I find it really useful. Once you've done it as a team, how did that help you guys as a team?
Yeah, I mean, it just identified places where actually we had communal strength that we weren't really leaning into, and areas where we potentially were lacking in certain things. Like, if nobody seemed to have the strategic element, then kind of we could have a discussion about what that might look like and actually what other strengths you might need to reframe. So like the whole point of the strengths profile or the skills discovery is that you don't focus on weaknesses at all. You just focus on your strengths. But one of my weaknesses was persistence, and it still is. I'm very, very not good at persisting through things. But we had a bit of a discussion about like how I might reframe that, because actually one of my other strengths is, say like judgment, prevention as well. So it's actually like, well, okay, I can maybe avoid the feeling of persistence if I look ahead and I think with my preventative mindset of these are all the obstacles I think are going to come up and things that are going to frustrate me. How can I mitigate for that ahead of time, so that I don't ever have to get to a place where I feel like I'm having to persist through stuff. So I think just having that conversation helped. But I think it also, it really helps with if you have the flexibility to plan what work people do and what initiatives and projects they're involved in, it gives you a better view of who should be involved in what and who their partner should be. And the other one I'd really recommend actually is called Adobe Creative Types. It's a fantastic one. It's so like when you go through the questions, you think, how the hell is this going to come up with anything useful? They're very odd questions. But it gives you this profile similarly at the end of what creative type you are. And the idea is to say that everybody is creative. I don't want to hear people say, I'm not creative, I can't do art, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. Everybody is creative. And what I love about it is that it shows you who your ideal partner is, collaboration partner. And I think, that, or the strengths side of things, I think is a really interesting way to look at it. And that's how I have really thought carefully about who I want in my circle and who I'm working on for certain projects now. Is I know where I'm lacking. There's no point me trying to be someone I'm not and spend time on my weaknesses, because I will just be drained and miserable through doing that. Instead, let me go find somebody that has the strengths that complement the areas where I'm lacking. So I think that is incredibly powerful and just, makes the whole experience more enjoyable, but also means the outcome is, 100 times better.
Yeah. I think as teams, I think the awareness individually you get from these things is really interesting. But I do think, and this is just an opinion, I think they play the biggest impacts when you do it as a team.
Yes.
And actually have the conversations as a team, because then as a leader you can support that. But as a group, you also know why maybe certain people frustrate you. Have you read the Surrounded by Idiots book?
I haven't, no, but that sounds great.
Yeah. Basically, it's based off the colours concept, right? And it's all Myers-Briggs and Carl Jung and insights and clarity 4D. But it's why people frustrate you. You know why some people are. You get on with people really well, or you collaborate really well with people, or some certain type of people, because they cover weaknesses. So all of those things are really interesting. And I think as a team, I think it's really important to do.
Yeah, I agree. And it's as much as like Myers-Briggs, for example, I didn't get on with, I do really appreciate that there is sometimes a need to, I'd say this without, take it with a pinch of salt, but like needing to box people in, because it does help you figure out how to communicate with them, and how to kind of flex your own style, I think. And I think that's something that I really struggle with earlier in my career, this idea of like, but why do I have to flex to them, like, and then become someone I'm not when I'm speaking to them? And I think it's an interesting one. It can you can play kind of both sides of it, but I think that kind of, that deeper understanding of where somebody else is coming from, and seeing, like ultimately you're there to, probably solve for the same problem, right? You're kind of, that you're there to solve an issue, come up with a solution together. It's just about navigating like the right way to do that, and like say, like leveraging into both of your strengths, because maybe that's part of the reason why you're clashing, is because you're, and I mean, this is something I see all the time. People are saying the exact same thing in totally different ways and thinking that they're arguing about it. And I'm just like, no. Like, you're literally saying the same thing. You are I'm trying to tell you, you are on the same page, but you're just getting, you're communicating, your communication is off, and you think you're now in an argument. It's so funny, but like, 9 times out of 10, it is like you're actually both on the same line. You're both trying to get to the same result here, but just maybe coming at it from slightly different ways. It's very entertaining.
Yeah. I want to go back. I want to go back to the title of this, talking about dinner with the hand you're dealt, or play with the hand you're dealt. Can you just explain to me how you think that's important, why you think that's important, and how maybe you're helping people, or how you've helped people understand that and kind of work towards that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately, I feel like your career especially shouldn't feel difficult. It should feel challenging, and it should push you in the right ways, but you should have this sort of nervous excitement about things that you want to do in your career. And I think, if you're going into a room to present on something and you are terrified and feel miserable and you can't wait for it to be over and you're just like dreading every second of it, I think there's maybe something that's a little bit off versus, and I know that is quite hard to recognize the difference. I appreciate that. But I think, for me, I've learned through doing like speaking in events like this and other like conferences and things, like of course I still get nervous, I still go red-faced and get really worried about what I'm saying, and it's still a stressful experience, but ultimately I am also excited. That is that part of me that goes, yeah, you know what, I'm excited to have my say and then kind of be involved in this. And then that feeling afterwards, I think, is really important. Like, do you walk away from that going, God, I feel really good, I feel really energized, like, yeah, I feel like I can take on the world, versus coming out of it being like, oh my God, that was the worst thing ever, I never want to do that again. And I think these are kind of some of the signs, I think, that if you are playing in the wrong game, basically, if you're in a career or a role that feels like it's constantly hard work and there's no enjoyable aspects of it, you're constantly drained, you're probably not in the right place. So I think that's, for me, why it's so important. Like, you spend so much of your time in work, whatever that looks like, make it an enjoyable, as possible experience, and something that actually kind of grows you as a person. And I think it, obviously all comes back to strengths, right? So I'm now very, very, acutely aware of what environments don't suit me and what environments do suit me. Some of that is role-based, some of that is team-based, some of that is company-based. It can mean a whole different bunch of things. But I think it's so important to be able to recognize that. And it takes a lot of work. Like I say, it's a journey to figure out what it is that you are really, truly good at and that you will get joy out of doing. But I would hope that everybody has had at least one experience of feeling energized and in the flow of something and really excited about something and could talk about it. And on the opposite side, when they felt really drained and absolutely hated every second of something. So I think it's just learning to tune into those different cues. And I think there have been, like, for example, for me, I got to a certain point in my previous company, in that role I realized wasn't right for me. And there was a path upwards in, linear progression wise. I got asked whether I wanted to get to the managing director level. And I initially said yes, because I thought that's the right thing to do, right? On paper, this is great.
Yeah, you saw your new salary and you were like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, this is the obvious play, right? And I should say merchandising director, sorry, not managing director. But yes, as soon as I said yes and I walked away from that conversation, I massively spiraled, like really, really spiraled, because I knew deep down that wasn't the right path for me. And I hadn't really yet thought about what else I would do, but I just knew inherently I couldn't take it. So after a long kind of talk with myself and a lot of sort of inner reflection, I went back to my manager at the time and I said, you know what, I'm sorry, I can't do this. It's not right for me. And I explained, well, it's not leaning into my strengths. I'm going to become someone that I'm not, and it's not worth it for my sake of self and well-being. And she was great about it. She understood and she respected my decision. And since then I've kind of gone out and found experiences that I know are more aligned to my strengths and what I know I'm going to get something out of. And I think, that it's so important. It is so important to understand that. And I think, I have moments where, in this role, in previous roles where, things do feel kind of easy, but I'm still like, from the feedback I'm getting from people, it's like, yeah, you're doing a great job and you're having a lot of influence and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, hang on, I must be getting something right then. Like it feels like kind of not effortless, but, close to in some circumstances, because I'm leaning into my strengths. Is what I do really well that, somebody else wouldn't be able to do as well. And they appreciate that in me, and they let me know. So I think that's the kind of place I would love everybody to get to, I guess, is to be like, it just, some of it feels effortless. Like I say, you do have challenge, but it's for the right reason. And ultimately you feel a sense of enjoyment and contentness about what you're doing.
Yeah, I hear that. One of the things I want to challenge or even just bring to the table a little bit is this concept of just being able to change what you're doing, right? Because we know how difficult that is right now. So, okay, well, I can't just change jobs. Maybe I've spent a lot of time investing in myself here to do this. So I think that's not as easy as potentially we make it sound. And I know as a coach, we both follow some of the passions because that's what's important to us and that's where our values are. But I do think, and then you were talking earlier on, and I was like, oh, actually, there's also this. Well, if it's stuff I'm not happy in my job and I'm not enjoying any of it, maybe because we're not focusing on the fact that we could be playing to our strengths. The job and actually the angle we're going down could be perfect, but we're just doing things which aren't playing to our strengths, or focusing on things that aren't playing to our strengths, or the stuff which we could be like, just being able to shift something in a slightly different way and to do it in a slightly different way could then impact us and our enjoyment and our motivation at work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it could be big scale change. It could be a total career pivot versus it could be, just having a conversation with your manager to say, you know what, these elements of my role aren't things that I am getting much out of. And I'd love to kind of have a conversation about changing it up a bit, maybe getting involved in some different projects, working with some different people. It doesn't have to be this big kind of dramatic change. Like I said, for me, like it's a mix of role, people, and organization itself. Like it could be any one of those three things that feels off or feels right. I've been in roles before where, the role itself wasn't great, but I loved the people. And that's what made me stay, because it kind of meant I could lean into my strengths from a, who I was collaborating and working with point of view, even though the role itself wasn't my favorite. I've had it on sort of the opposite end as well. And I think I definitely hear you as well. And I appreciate, like, sometimes it can sound like, oh, it's just easy to go out there and do all this stuff. I mean, like, there's, I've made some very strategic moves in my career, which has taken me years, but it's with this bigger picture in mind. And I think it's a lot easier to sort of come to terms with, a situation you're maybe not loving right now, knowing that it's for a bigger purpose. So, I have an idea of where I want to go in my life in general. Like, I think that's been a big shift for me as well, of, I don't want to place so much emphasis on career. This is about the lifestyle that I want, and having to think about what that looks like in the broader picture of things. And therefore, what does career serve for me in that picture? And also, what are the steps that I need to take to get there? Some of those steps I'm probably not going to love, but I know that I'm trying to get myself to a place where I am then leveraging my strengths more often than not. And I feel like I've got the flexibility I want, and I've sort of built the lifestyle I want. So yeah, some of this is like, some of it is a sit tight and wait. Some of it is a start making some small steps. And, and you're right, it is a particularly difficult environment to change careers, especially right now. And I think, it's things like, I know everyone hates to hear it, but it's networking is a big thing, and being really patient with this. I was speaking to someone yesterday about this and saying, networking doesn't have to be this big thing. It can just be connecting with an individual one-on-one, and who knows who in their network they know that could help you. And that might take 6 months, a year, 18 months plus, to come to fruition. But nurturing some of those relationships and just being sort of visible as well about what kind of things you're going after, so that you do get invited to the right rooms. But yeah, of course, all of this takes time.
Can I just bring, because I agree there about building brand and about getting jobs right, but just thinking about the strengths thing and maybe the unhappiness around work. Something which I'm hearing is this concept of vision. You know where you want to be, right? You know what life you're trying to build. And I read down here just kind of a couple of notes just like around that vision, kind of purpose and kind of values. And I just want to bring that into this conversation to understand how that plays and what levers how you have to connect maybe strengths to our visions, purpose, and values. Because sometimes maybe that I believe that's our starting point. The strengths have to connect to that slightly. But I'd love to know what your opinion on that is and how that then impacts this motivational piece or the enjoyment of work piece.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely I always start with values with my clients, if people haven't done that work before, because I think these are, ultimately the non-negotiable. This is what you have to have in your life. This is the way you navigate the world, how you make decisions, how you respond to other people. And I think often we learn a lot about our values through when people wind us up and we realize okay, this has crossed a value of mine. So I think I always encourage people to start there. And I think, to be honest, it's something that I have to remind myself to keep coming back to. I think that tells me a lot about who I want to be and who I want to have around me. And like I say, what are those non-negotiables? So there are certain, especially when it comes to career, let's say, like there are certain environments that I would absolutely avoid like the plague because of my values. But I think that interlink with strengths is really powerful, because I think it kind of, it just shows you your potential of who you could be, as well as like, the values typically won't change and your strengths don't likely change a huge amount. But like I said, the more you kind of work on them and you're aware of them, they might shift around a little bit in terms of, your use of them and enjoyment of your use of them. But I think it kind of gives you a lot of insight into that next layer down, I guess, of like, okay, I know what environments I definitely don't want to be in, but what is going to be the best place for me to be that allows me to be the best version of myself, and what might that kind of look like and change over time. But I think, I mean, there's other tools that we, a lot of coaches use, like the Wheel of Life. I don't know if you've come across that one before yet. So the idea is that you come up with 8 different areas of your life that are important to you. Could be financial freedom, it could be friends, family, relationships, career, professional development, all these different things. And you sort of map yourself as to where you think you're at on each of those different areas, and also be clear on what good looks like. And I think, I got the benefit of doing a lot of this through my coach training, right? And it really made me sit back and think, okay, well, yeah, when I say, relationship or health and fitness or financial, stability or whatever, like, what do I mean by that? Like, what would be a 10 out of 10? And it's quite a difficult thing to sit and really kind of think about, like, what do I actually want that to look like? But I think a lot of that introspection taught me a lot about where I want to be in the future, and kind of it almost allowed me to feel a bit more at peace with the journey I was taking, because I realized I don't have to have it all figured out right now. Like, you're never going to be totally in balance on all of those different areas. Like, you have to put more focus into one or the other depending on what situation you're in. But then sort of layering the strengths on top of that, you kind of think, well, how do I leverage my strengths to allow me to get to that place then? If I have this picture in my mind now of where I want to be in the next 5, 10, 20 years. And also one of my other favorite activities is, if you're sitting on your rocking chair when you're 80 years old, looking back at your life, what do you want people to say about you? I realized it's like, career doesn't even come into it. Like I wouldn't even mention it. It would be so many other things, friends, family, I don't know, just it would be so many other different things. I was like, that's really, really interesting. So how do I get myself to that place using my strengths? That
I think that's the part which got me. Like, how do I get to these places, or how do I achieve this vision, purpose, values, mission by using my strengths rather than not using my strengths?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because I think if we all have milestones, I think, of what we want to achieve in certain areas of our life, but I think I'm so less wedded to all of that now. Like, it is, I know it sounds really cheesy, but it is all about the journey. And I think if you can reframe it that way and appreciate things in that way, it then is all about, how do I enjoy this as much as possible? How do I collect as many experiences as possible along this journey? Because the milestone isn't really the point. It's the enjoyment along, and you're not going to enjoy the journey if you're constantly leaning into your weaknesses or learn skills that aren't things that you actually enjoy doing or get energy from. So I think that's the kind of the link to it for me.
Yeah, my coach, who I did my qualification with, is a Gallup's qualified certified coach, right?
Yeah, nice.
And he always uses this terminology, and I think I'm going to probably butcher it / adapt it, but our weaknesses are what sinks the ship, and our strengths is what pushes the ships forward.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And now listening to this and talking about this, I feel like that's true, but then you've got what's the wheel called? I want to get a steering wheel.
Yeah.
The steering wheel is like the purpose and the values, like, and the vision piece, right?
Yeah.
But then if you use your strengths, the more you use your strengths, the more strength or more power you'll have to get into those goals and get into those kind of that vision. The less you use it, then the less power you're going to have to get there.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, even just like, I don't know, building on that kind of picture, if you like, is I kind of see it as, you can lean into your weaknesses and your learned skills if you really like, but you're going to be constantly jumping ship to the next one, trying to find the right vehicle to move you forward. Basically, if you have that, awareness of and alignment with your strengths, you're on a clear path. You're, yes, you might come up against some bad weather, but you're actually, what you're doing. You're on the same ship. You know how to use all the equipment. You can move through that storm 10 times quicker than you could do if you had to jump ship and start again. And that's the other bit about, strengths that I found particularly interesting, is it massively builds your resilience and ability to bounce back, and I think, like, for me, it's made me recognize when I have been in environments that aren't the right place for me. Previously, I would have put that back on myself and said, what am I doing wrong? Now I'm very clear on, nope, I know my worth. I know what I'm good at. I know the environments I thrive in. This ain't it. And that's not my problem. And that's been a huge, for my own like I say, my own sense of self and well-being, that's been a huge kind of reframe.
Yeah, interesting. I really want to, I've got something I want to bring to this from a sporting awareness piece, right? So bear with me. Hopefully that challenges that thinking, because I think we have an element of control, right? But look, when I think about strengths, we always, especially when we have conversations, because we buy into this concept around strengths, but we forget about talking about weaknesses, right? And if I'm talking to a pro athlete, pro sportsman, and I said to them, just focus on your strengths, they might not get picked because their weaknesses aren't good enough. So at what point do we begin to focus on our weaknesses, especially from a skill standpoint, to make sure that they aren't sinking the ship or they're not getting in the way from us being successful? So how do you manage that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, you can't get away from them, right? They're always going to be there, and there are always going to be situations that you're in where you need to still figure out how you navigate through that. I think it's a bit like the example I shared earlier, and I'm trying to think of how it would work in a sports environment, but I'm not a very sporty person. But it's thinking about, okay, so yes, acknowledging that this is a weakness I have. What are the strengths I have that actually could reframe that and help me get around that? Who are the people, or what is the support I need to overcome that and do it in a way which feels a bit more empowering? I think it's just a case of spending as little time on your weaknesses as you can, really, or thinking about a way that you can leverage your strengths to navigate around it. So like I use that example of persistence. I try to mitigate that by leaning into my strength of prevention and foreseeing what obstacles I think are going to come up. Or like I said earlier, if you're in an individual sport, I'm not, advocate you go and get a partner and join a doubles team, but there's something in that as well of like, going and finding a partner that can, take the pressure off the weaknesses that you have. So it's not to say that you absolutely won't spend any time looking at them or thinking about them. I think it's just trying to spend as little time there as possible, like I said, or finding a different way around it. Because I guess I'd sort of argue like you might not be in the right sport if you're spending all your time working on your weaknesses. Maybe you're not in the right place, and maybe hopefully you're in a sport which leverages, leans into your strengths, and there's just that one, I don't know, 5-10% that isn't quite right that needs working on, and I think that's fine. But hopefully you're, like I say, you're spending majority of your time working to your strengths.
Yeah, and I guess I'll share my thoughts on that, because I do agree, and if you can get the support, but if you've got, and I'll give you my football analogy, right? If you're a football player and you've got no left foot, right? That's not going to help. It's your weakness as a skill, right? You don't have a left foot.
Yeah.
And so as a professional football player, what would happen is you would train and you would practice and you'd focus on that weakness to improve that weakness. I think when we begin to look at it from a training and working on not working with our weakness, it's working to improve our weakness, and that's the development area. I think it shifts the way that we look at that. So when we are spending time on it, we know I am practicing this. So I speak, and I work with a lot of people who don't like public speaking, right?
Yeah.
As you progress, you have to present, unfortunately.
Yes.
So you have to practice, right? It might be a weakness. It might be uncomfortable. It might not even be a weakness. It might just be uncomfortable, right? But it might be a weakness. So you have to practice. If you want to progress and get better, it's a skill you have to practice. And so then, yes, I agree with you. Then you can begin to look at the other strengths you have to see how that can work into working on your strength. But also, you just have to work on your weakness to get better at it. So then if you want to feel better about it, because confidence comes from repeated successful behaviors, then you have to do that as well, right?
Yeah. And I think, I come back to, it's a journey, right? So, are you actually enjoying the process of that development or that learning or that, training? Because if you really hates public speaking and you hate every second of prepping for public speaking, you're not going to be having a good time, to be honest. But if you can find a way of the prep work or the learning about how to more confidently speak in public settings, like that's the key, because you might still not enjoy the public speaking element. It might be something you just have to do because it's what is going to get you visible or progressed in your career or whatever it is you're doing. But how can you enjoy the process more? And I think that's kind of, it doesn't always have to be about the end outcome. It can just be about the journey itself. So, my prep for, public speaking, for certain things I do at work, for certain things with I do in coaching looks really different now, because I've learned that there's a certain way that I like to do it that leans into my strengths, that makes it a more enjoyable experience. And yes, I might still not quite like the actual thing itself, but I've enjoyed the run up and I've enjoyed the experience of it afterwards, or the feeling of it afterwards.
Yeah. So true. I want to bring leaders into this, and obviously we've spoken about leadership. And how do we help leaders when it comes to strengths or to using team strengths?
Yeah, I think I'd probably get into more sort of the practical side, but I know I'm conscious as well. There's been a question from Renata. Hello, Renata. Nice to see you. About how you identify your strengths, the methods and things to consider and that kind of thing. So I think we can probably bring that into this answer a little bit. But I guess to kind of take a bit more of an abstract view on it first, I think it's important for the leader themselves to do this journey and figure out kind of, where their strengths lie, and be honest and open through that journey as well about what they're learning about themselves and kind of sharing with their team. But I think there is a structured approach you can take. So, the way I coach is I always get my clients to do some self-reflection first. So I have a workbook that I arm my clients with that asks them to do a range of different activities, because like I said before, it's not just a case of doing an assessment and then being like, okay, cool, I'm good to go. So before even taking the assessment, what I ask my clients to do is firstly have a think about what it is they think they're good at. Then think about what they think other people might say about them and their strengths. and then they have to go and ask. So I tell them to ask at least 6 people, if not up to 12, of a range of different people. So colleagues, friends, family, people that you interact with, whether it's for you a hobby or something else. Go and ask a range of people to tell you what they think your top 3 strengths are. Then you go and do the report, and you get this view of like, and this kind of new articulation, if you like, of different strengths. And you use all of that information to basically have this holistic view of what your strengths might be, and also decide for yourself what's most important to you, because you always have to take it with a little bit of a pinch of salt. I love getting feedback. I think it's one of the most important ways that you can find out about your strengths is through other people's eyes and getting that feedback. But I always say take it with a little bit of a pinch of salt, because people often praise you for things they see as a weakness in themselves. So it might not actually be your strength. It might just be something that they think that you do better than them. And therefore they're like, okay, yeah, I think you're really good at this. But I think what I notice is a lot of people see these themes emerging. Similar things come out. People use different language. Obviously, the tool itself uses specific language, but it gives them this confidence to say, actually, you know what? Yeah, like I'm really proud of this. And I do acknowledge that this is a strength of mine. It's something that I perhaps noticed but wasn't confident enough to call out or say, but it's something other people have said about me, and it's something that's been reflected back in the report as well. So I think it's doing, for leaders, it's kind of doing this whole rounded approach of asking their team to get feedback and raising awareness of it and talking about it more as well, and praising as well. I think more, we often kind of talk about when things go wrong, not so good at talking about when things go right. So this whole kind of holistic approach to figuring out your strengths is really important. And then, having a discussion about it. And like I said, whether you want to do that on an individual level or do it as a team, I think sometimes it is a bit easier to do, what I described earlier is let's have a look at our picture as a team and see where we've got common strengths and where there might be some missing perhaps, and who we might want to partner up together. Because I think the more we normalize the language and the more we are talking about it, the easier it feels to then do that for yourself as well. And I think it's then, making sure it is integrated into personal development plans as well. So like I say, some of this language can be quite abstract, but hopefully when you've gone and sought feedback from other people, you might have hopefully gotten some examples or some evidence of where they've seen that strength in you. If you haven't, then go back around and ask for that, and start to recognize it in yourself so that you can actually put some sort of practical application behind it. This is how I want to focus my development based on these different things. I actually completely reframed my PDP at one point because it was all very task focused and outcome focused. I actually just started, I was like, right, my top 3 personal development objectives for this year are just my strengths, like the strengths that I wanted to work on. And then through that, I identified the right activities I needed to do and opportunities I needed to put, environments I needed to put myself in to allow me to develop that strength further, and how I would then sort of continue that practice, check in on it, and just have that continued conversation. I think it has to be this sort of integrated approach so that people actually do something with it. And like I said, I think one of the biggest things is just normalizing it and having everybody talk about it and encouraging everybody to talk about their own strengths, but also recognize and sort of appreciate them in other people.
I really like that. I think the concept of getting feedback and bringing other people into this as well, and understanding perceived strengths is really important. Where do you think, this is the dream world, right? And so I always think about how my brain works, thinking about sport, right? If I'm building a team, I'm going to think about what my team needs to play like. And so I think about how do I put players in the right positions for my team to be successful like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get players playing in positions where they don't think that they play. So how do leaders support that? And in the dream world, in our dream world, actually you are creating that where actually everybody's playing to their strengths, and that strength is then allowing this team to succeed. How do you encourage leaders to do that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think it's doing the activities that I described really as a first starting point, and then sort of getting the team to, I guess, acknowledge and raise awareness for themselves of where people may not be playing to their strengths or maybe better suited. And I think it's difficult, right? Because I mean, you'd be in a very unique position if you were building a team for the very first time and you had the option of like recruiting in exactly who you wanted to build the team you wanted. Like, chances are you've got a team that you're working with that you might have to just think about who gets involved in slightly different things. And I mean, if you have ultimate flexibility to move people between roles and that feels like the right thing to do, then fantastic. But if it's more likely going to be getting people to work on different sort of projects and initiatives together and just testing the waters a little bit to see if that works. Because I think there's, like I say, I've said a lot in this conversation, all of this stuff takes time. So I wouldn't encourage anybody to make any drastic decisions about, moving their team around or whatever. But try and test the water a little bit with like just getting people involved in some slightly different things. And like I say, just bringing people together that might not usually collaborate, because we do as humans have a tendency to kind of, want to spend more time with people that are similar to us. But actually, as a leader, you could say, actually, you can objectively use this language now and this new way of articulating where the different strengths are across the team to say, you and you would make a great partnership on this team. And whereas previously those two people might have seen themselves in conflict with one another and would have avoided working together, now hopefully see it in a new light, because they can see, actually, okay, well, they play to strengths I don't have. We just need to change the way we communicate and how we come together and how we distribute tasks as well. That means we can work together more effectively. So I think it's, like I said, I think you can do the kind of structured activities and raise the awareness and do that discovery piece first, and then just test and trial a little bit to see what works. And I think, ultimately, like, sometimes you do have to make quite tough decisions, and hopefully an individual would come to realize this on their own. And if not, as a leader, I think maybe sometimes you do have to suggest, like, I'm not sure if this is the right environment for you, because, you aren't able to lean into your strengths at all. But I think, like I say, that's an extreme, but I have seen that happen before where, like individuals have had that realization and be like, maybe this isn't the right place for me. And actually the best thing for the team would be for me to go elsewhere. And the best thing for me to, it would be the best thing for me as well. So I think, but it's a really interesting kind of way to look at things. And like when I've experienced it myself, when I've seen other people do it, it does have a huge impact on the way people work together. And like I say, it breaks down those barriers of where people traditionally might have had an issue with one another or avoided working with somebody, to actually appreciate. And like they can have that healthy debate, because I think a lot of us are people pleasers, right? But actually it's really good if we, there's always going to be a better outcome if we can have a healthy debate over something and come at it from different perspectives and then work through that and say, actually, okay, like I say, most of the time you are actually coming at it from the same point of view, you just don't realize it. But yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Let's close this out, Hannah. What's the biggest lesson you want to share with people today from this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. There's quite a few, to be honest, but I think it is like learning to see your strengths as something that will support you along your journey, not being so worried about the end destination or the milestone. Is actually, how do you just make your experience in general more enjoyable and something that brings you energy? And like I said, that's not going to be all the time. Like, nobody's content and happy 24/7. But how do you just make sure that more of your time is spent doing things that you love and that give you energy and that challenge you in the right ways? I think that would be it.
Perfect. I love that. Hannah, where can people find you?
So come find me on LinkedIn. So it's Hannah Louise Shelton on LinkedIn, or come have a look at my Instagram account. I have not posted in a little while, so don't look at that. But it's HannahLouise.coaching. I am more than happy to, if you're curious about any of the tools I use, the framework I use, more than happy to support anybody with that. Hopefully you realize I'm a very chatty person, so I'd be more than happy to chat to anybody about that and answer any questions, regardless of whether you want to work with me or not. I'd be more than happy to have a conversation. So yeah.
Amazing. Hannah, thank you so much. For everybody listening, thank you for joining. Keep your eye out for the next one. Just got uploaded today. We're speaking to Denise next week, looking at how we play freely using her lessons from 30 plus years of like elite level netball. So that'll be really interesting. But everybody else, Hannah, and especially to you, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And we'll see you all soon. Hannah, stay where you are.
I will.